Now, I'm really not trying to destroy my picture, okay? So let me undo. I'll back up. And as a matter of fact, this is a stupid shortcut, but I'm sure a lot of you have known that if you use Command-Z and it goes backwards, it actually toggles backwards and forwards. So every time you hit Command-Z, it undoes and then redoes. Well, if you don't, I don't ever use Command-Z in Photoshop. I'll use Command-Option-Z. Because what that does is it steps backward in time. You can go back more than one step. All right. What we've got now is we've got the ability to do that. That's great. I want to get rid of the Smart Sharpen, so I'll turn it off. If I wanted to change it, I could double-click the words Smart Sharpen, and I could get back to the dialog box. That's the best part. Now, the reason why I'm taking you here is because if we literally go in and say, let's make this set up for smart filters, if I then go to Image Adjustments, you can see that we can do HDR toning, which is newer in Photoshop CS5, and shadows highlights. And if I do one of these, if I apply one of these, let's say Shadow Highlights, and click OK, you're going to see it shows up in the Layers panel. You can double-click on it. You can create a mask for it. You can turn it on and off. And you've got some way to go back in time. That's probably one of the best parts, okay? All right, let me reset my workspace here. Now, I forgot something here. Back when we were doing the boy and the ball and all that stuff, I told you that I was going to show you the history of the file, and I didn't do that, so sorry. I'll show you it in this file now. You can see in the preferences, it should still be turned on. It should be working for every image I work on from that point on. If you had turned on the history log in the preferences, all right, we went in there and we went to General. I'll just show you again real quick. And we turn on the history log. If you then work on an image, to see that data, to see that information, I can go to File, File Info, and you can see the shortcut right there. And this is the metadata for the file. A lot of you have probably been in here before. There's a lot of stuff we can look at in here. You're going to see that there's like 6,000 tabs along the top. You'll see one called History. This is one I used to drool at. I'd see it and be like, how do I get that? How do I do something with that? Anyway, this is what it does. This is what I was talking about. It's going to put it in here. It's going to say, okay, here's everything you did, every selection you made, all the properties you set, and that's because of the preferences I set. Once I click and save this, it's going to literally say, okay, you did all this stuff, and the next person that opens this up can go into this history and look at it and see what was done. So if you get somebody who keeps screwing up images, you can turn it on, send them the image, and then look and see what they did. Anyway, that's bad. Anyway. All right, so let me close this image. I'll close that one up, and I won't save it. I'll go back over to Mini Bridge. And just a couple other little things here that are really pretty cool. I think it's going to seem really simple, but are very useful. Touch up, if you do retouching, things like that, there's a lot of things that we can do. A simple technique for working with, let's say, like the healing brush tools. I don't know how many of you work with these things. These are awesome, right? In the past, what we used to do, let me zoom in a bit. We used to use the clone stamp tool a lot. Jumping around, I apologize. Used to use the clone stamp tool a lot. The thing is with the clone stamp, it doesn't heal, which means it just copies good over bad. I started using, in some cases, I started using the healing brush or the spot healing because they tend to heal. They'll look around and say, okay, let's blend and get it to work in. Well, if I use the healing brush, let's suppose that I want to get rid of this guy right here. So I'll zoom in a bit and I'll move over. By the way, you can all see the pixel grid out there. We can always turn that off if we want to. That's under Show Pixel Grid. I'll turn that thing off. Sometimes I don't need it if I'm not doing web work. This is one of the worst images ever. I apologize for that. But if we use the healing brush tool here, let's say, and I'll make my brush a little bit smaller using our shortcuts and make it a little bit softer, we're going to sample good and go to bad. So I'll go Alt-click or Option-click to good. Go over to the bad, and you can see, okay, well, let's start painting on the bad over here and get rid of the guy. That's great. We're going to have this sailboard here that just doesn't have a person on it, which is awesome. And there we go. If I let go now, watch what happens here. It's a healing brush. Okay? How many of you have run into that before, right? So what it does is it looks around and says, oh, well, let's go a couple pixels that way and start grabbing and blending and heal all this stuff to make it look a little more realistic. Well, sometimes you don't need that. So let me undo. So the first thing, simple thing you can do. I don't know how many of you use the lasso tools. You can see mine right here. what you do is if you make a select, now I'm going to be really sloppy here. You need to be a little bit more precise on this, but if you make a selection of the stuff you want to work with first, so I just barely get to the edge there, and what we're going to do is we're going to heal within that selection and it won't grab outside. This is really good and useful for edges. I would have done a better job. I should have done a better job on that, but anyway. I'll go to the healing brush tool. I'll do the same thing. Alt-click, grab the good, Option-click rather on Mac. Go out and start painting, do my thing, and, you know, don't do what I'm doing here. We always want to let go once, right? And then go in, and once I let go, you'll see what happens here. Now, I got a little bit carried away. I should have made a better selection there, but you'll see what it's trying to do. It's trying to pull, but I messed up. I got a couple black pixels there. I shouldn't have gotten those. But it's trying to do it only within that area. So you can use these healing brush tools by setting a selection first, which can be really, really cool, really useful. All right. Let me go back over to mini bridge here. Like I said, that's a really simple technique, really, really simple. Let me show you. I've got a couple other little things here that I want to show you I think are really kind of cool. I don't want to show you that, but I think I might. Here's a technique I think is great, something that you may use here and there for working with skin or working with touching up images. And there it is right there. Okay. Now, let's suppose that, I'll zoom in here a bit. Let's suppose that I've got skin and I've got some blemishes and freckles and things like that, and I want to get rid of them. Well, if you want to, of course, we can use the healing brushes, the clone stamps, the this, to that, you know, all sorts of different methods for doing this. Something else we can do as well, and what I tend to do is when I'm working with images and I tend to make, let's say, corrections and skin and tonal adjustments and stuff like that, a lot of times I'll make a copy or a new layer. So I'll go to the background layer there and just make a copy by pressing Command-J or Control-J on Windows. And I got the layer out there. What we're going to do is we're going to blur that, okay? So I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, and this is going to be really dumb looking, but you're going to see that we actually have a couple different things here. We've got what's called a surface blur. This is a really cool blur. There's 50 in here, right? But surface blur, if I choose that, what it tries to do, and I don't know if you're going to be able to tell here, but it tries to blur just the surface, not the edges. So it almost, it's actually kind of cool. I mean, it almost gives it a cartoony, painterly look to the image. So this is a great way to kind of, you know, there's a lot of blurs you can use, but I just wanted to show you this one. It's kind of neat. You can go pretty far, pretty crazy if you want to. You got to be careful because the further you go in, and you can see it's actually pulling it away. I can increase the threshold to do more. I don't really want to do that. I'm going to take it where it is. And by the way, a lot of you that work in dialog boxes in Photoshop, which we all do, if you want to reset the settings, you can always hold down the Option key, and the cancel turns into reset, and that'll just reset what you have. All right, I'll click OK. Awesome. Now, we're all done, right? Well, not hardly, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to use history. I know I mentioned history before, but history is awesome because if you're working with history, you can always go back in time, and that's what a lot of us use this for. But you can also use it for a couple other things. We can take snapshots. So here's what I tend to do. If I'm working on a project and I've got a big move ahead, I'm about to combine two images, do some compositing, do some correcting, whatever, something that I might want to go back to that step or that point, you can take a snapshot. So if you click on Create Snapshot right down here, what it does is it takes a snapshot. Now that means that you have multiple history states that you can go back to. So I have the original open state, and then if I keep going, I can always go back to this snapshot, and it goes back to this exact state where it is right now. Now another thing we can do is this. Let's suppose that I've got this layer and I blurred it, and I don't want the whole thing to be blurred because it frankly looks dumb. I want to do just part blurring. I want to just choose where I want to blur. Well, in the history panel, if I click and go back to history state, you'll see that, whoa, hey, we're back where we were, not so great. If I go back to surface blur, we're back there. Well, if I go back one, what we can do is we can then paint in parts of the surface blur where we want it. So this is called a history. You can paint with history. So this took me a few times to get this. I didn't quite understand the steps at first, but you go back. Okay, so you do what you want to do to the whole thing. You go back one history state. You then come to the left. You're going to see this little box here, and if you click this, this is called the source for the history brush. You can then go over to the history brush, in the Tools panel over here. And you got to be careful with this because you got to set the opacity and how this brush works and how much you want to paint with it. But as you paint with this thing, what it's going to do is it's going to paint in that blurring. Now I'm going to do a bad thing here. I'm just going to go all over and see and show you what I've got. You can see what it's doing. It's painting in just parts. It's almost like it's masking parts of it and not masking others. Let me undo. What I will probably do is I'll probably want to change the opacity or blending mode or something to make that look so it's not quite as, if you look at this, this is really blurred. So when you're doing a lot of touch-up, what we can do is, especially with opacity, you can change the opacity. What's great about this is right now, if you go in and press a number like 3 with a brush selected, it's going to change the opacity up there. If I press, let's say, 6, it'll do 60%. If I press 3, it'll do 33%. Pressing 3 will do 30. So I can then go in and start to paint with some of this, paint with the blur. Let me add a little bit more here. And start to just kind of smooth the skin out a little bit to get rid of some of that modeling. And of course, I'm already starting to work against myself here. But that allows you to paint with history. So you can go in and use that brush. And a lot of techniques, there's a lot of ways to do this, of course. But this is one way you can get that done, okay? All right, let me zoom back out here and get back where we were. Here's a quick one. If you have a spot and you want to get rid of it, and a lot of times this can be with artwork, with all sorts of things. You got a background you need to get rid of. There's dust, specks, all sorts of things in big, large areas. Some of you have used this before, but in the patch tool. Patch tool is awesome, I think. What you can do is you can surround, and you want to go away from the edge of the bad. You're going to surround the bad. Go a little further away from it. Don't make an exact selection. And drag it to the good. And what it does, it blends. So it actually blends and heals, and it's, like I said, you can do that with 50 tools, but that could be cool for big areas that you're trying to just fix. So like backgrounds and stuff like that. But like I said, that was the patch tool. So excuse me, I apologize. I'm going to blow your eardrums out. Okay, real quick, one more. Yeah, I gotta get done here, but I think I've shown this one before. Nah, I'm not going to show this. This is not that exciting. Anyway, all right. I think we are at time. Let me just show you one other real quick. I can't stop. One other real quick, straightening. If you need to straighten a photo in CS whatever, you can do this 50 ways, but in CS5 and later, we can use what's called the ruler tool. If you go over to the ruler tool on the left over here in the tools panel, what you can do is go to the layer you want to straighten, essentially, and you can click and drag. And what you want to do is you want to follow some surface, like a sidewalk or something that needs to be horizontal, essentially. So just run it parallel. Run the ruler parallel. You'll see it just draws it out. And you'll see this nice little button up here in the control panel called Straighten. So if I click on Straighten, this will take a second. Hold on. What the Straighten does is it does two things. It actually straightens the image and crops it down. We could do this a million ways, right? But that's just sometimes a little faster, a little bit easier, a nicer way to do things. But all right, let me quick show you just one or two things in Adobe Bridge that I think are really cool. Then we'll get to some questions. Of course, if we work in Photoshop CS5 and later, we can work with Mini Bridge. We can also browse in Bridge, and a lot of versions of Photoshop can do this. If I choose Browse in Bridge, it's going to open up Adobe Bridge. One of my favorite features in Adobe Bridge, I love, love, love this, is the Export panel. If you look at it right here, you're going to see Export. Now, the Export panel in Adobe Bridge is something that you may not see right away. As a matter of fact, you need to have the Essentials, well, you could have the Essentials workspace selected here, but that should show up. You can also go up under Window and choose one of the panels, like let's say the Effects panel. Or the Export panel, sorry, Export panel. Save to hard drive right here is awesome. If you've ever wanted to take a bunch of Photoshop files and just converted them into quick JPEGs to send to somebody, that's what this thing does. If I grab, let's say, a bunch of Photoshop files, shift-click or select them, drag them into the Save to Hard Drive, double-click on it, you're going to see over here it's going to let me save them as a JPEG. It's going to let me resize them, set up the image quality, add metadata, do different things, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a quick save as JPEG. There's 5 billion ways to do this, but this is one of my favorites. Because if you look over here, you're going to see it loads them into a queue. And you can just kind of keep loading Photoshop files in here or other types of files. And what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, when you're ready to run the whole queue, You just say, let's export it. You click the arrow there, do it, it'll save it, it'll pull them out of the queue, and you've got yourself a series of JPEGs. Anyway. All right, so I think we're at end. We need to stop here. Let's see if there are any questions. Hopefully, I wanted to go through a smattering of things that we'll use in Photoshop, and hopefully you gleaned a few things from what I showed today. If you have a question, you can do it over there in the chat. You can also do it in the questions pod if you want to. So let's take a look over here and see what we've got. I'll go to Q&A and see. Okay, so Sam Hill, let me ask some questions here. How does the history log affect file size? You know, Sam, that's actually a really good question. It really doesn't affect file size that much. It's just text in the metadata. I suppose that if you were to spend like 6 days and do 6,000 things on there, then maybe it might add a little bit of file size. But otherwise, I'm pretty sure that it wouldn't. Okay, we just had a question from Lisa. We've got a couple here I'll get to, don't worry. On that bridge, save to HD feature, can you save to an FTP? Not that I'm aware of. I'm pretty sure that you cannot. It lets you save to subfolders and folders. If it's on an external drive, you can, but I don't see any FTP information up here. So yeah, I don't believe you can from what I've seen. So. All right, another question here from Frank. Is there a way to do multiple images from a shoot in Photoshop rather than Lightbox? In other words, if you have the same image, how do you do the fastest retouching ASAP? Yeah, Frank, I'm right there. I know. I do a lot of photo retouching, and there's a lot of ways to do this stuff. But yeah, Photoshop does have a lot of actions and different things built in that you can utilize, that you can use, I'll say. I can't really go through a lot of those right now and say what's the fastest retouching technique possible, but I use a lot of actions. You get through and you use a lot of the built-in actions as well. You can get it done pretty quickly. Roy, why am I only hearing a loop? Oop, that's not good. Okay. Steve, hi Brian, I need a scaling method. Ideas, i.e. if your box needed to be a certain size. Yeah, Steve, there's a bunch of ways. And I keep saying that, I'm sorry. If I go to the crop tool, you can always scale width and height here. If you need to make sure it's like 3x3 or 6x4. You can also set up an action, run an action on images. There's a bunch of ways you can do that. If you want to do it manually, you can use the crop tool. That's one way to do it. Deb, let's see. When you enable the history and preferences, does it increase the file size? Yeah, it's relatively negligible, to be honest, unless you do like a tome, like 50,000 different things. John, how do you hide the history metadata in the file if you don't want someone else to see it? Great tip. Wow, I'm pretty sure you're going to have to go into the metadata and delete it or export it. You can export the metadata as well. So you probably have to delete it out of there. That's a good question. I've never done that. Okay, so let's see. Whoops. Oh, no good. The audio. Oh, you guys, I'm so sorry. Tri-Valley in the 80s. Margaret, I did not, actually. I went to a school in Chicago. Bill was told, what effect? Okay, what effect were you going to do with the wink.jpg file, Alvin? The hair 101, I'll get to that. Okay, what effect was I going to do with wink? I'll just show you real quick, you guys. We're kind of running out of time. Watch, where is it? Hair, wink, there she is. So what I was going to do is show you, and I actually have on my blog, I have something like this. I was going to use what's called clone source. And if you use something like, let's say, the healing brush tool, what you can do is you can actually, and let me make this a little bigger, you can go in and do things like flip, rotate what you're about to paint with using the healing brushes or things like that. So the clone source, you can also sample different areas, and it lets you do a lot of different things pretty quickly. Now, I kind of messed that up, but anyway, you can kind of see the idea here. But instead of just painting exactly what it sees, you can flip, rotate, change the source, all sorts of different things. That was what I was going to do with Wink. Portraiture plugin is available for fast retouching. Deb, yeah, that's actually, I've seen that one. I've seen people use it. That's a good suggestion. Thank you. Daniel, love the content aware. Been using PSD. Great. Awesome. Okay. Joseph, hey, how's it going? An item within the image. Sorry, I came in late. Yes, this is being recorded. Multiple images. You can run an action if you want to. What is your blog? If you go to askbrianwood.com, you can get to my blog up top. There's a little blog. I picked up more useful instruction and then pulled it. You're going to go somewhere where I could share them. Thank you so much, Sam. I appreciate that. Philip, Brian, USPS still can't get layers. What is the quickest method to learn layers and masks? Wow. I don't know, to be honest. I was going to say you could go to like lynda.com. They've got a lot of videos you can learn on layers and masking. They've got a lot up there. There's Adobe, come on, Design Center you can go to. They've got videos where you can learn this kind of stuff. We can do other ones on masking and things like that. I don't know if, maybe a mall presentation. We'll see. But, oh, how do you open a bunch of files into one layered file from Bridge? I did mention that. I didn't show you. So here's what you can do. If you have Adobe Bridge open and you want to bring a bunch of files into one image, like layer it, let's say, freezing, okay, you can select them in Bridge. I can right-click or go up to Tools. You can go up to, I'll do it up in the menus. Go up to Tools, Photoshop. You'll see Load Files into Photoshop Layers. So it'll take a bunch of image files you've got. They don't even have to be Photoshop files, and it will load them. Now, I'm not 90% sure on that. I forget. But it'll load them all into a single Photoshop file and put them all as separate layers. It'll even keep, if you have masking and different things like that, you'll see right here what it did. It'll keep what it had, basically, essentially for some of it. So there you go, pretty quick. By hiding the history metadata so someone else doesn't see it, was there an option to not export metadata? No, I didn't. I don't believe that there is anything like that I've seen. So if you found a fix for Photoshop CS5 freezing when going to info while using Lion on Mac. Wow, Linda, I just got a machine. I just upgraded to Lion. I'm a little slow on the uptake on that. But yeah, no, I'm sure you've probably been up to the Adobe forums to check that type of thing out. I would go up to look for Adobe forums and ask the question up there. Sorry, I don't have an answer. Can you recommend a good site to download actions? Yeah, I would go up to Adobe Design Center. There's a lot of freebie actions. There's Photoshop.com, I believe, has free actions available. I'm pretty sure I saw them up there. Deb, thank you. I appreciate it. Joseph, you're very welcome. When you export, Margaret, when you export for web and devices, you can select the metadata you wish to include or exclude. Oh, that's good. Okay. I didn't know that. Awesome, Margaret. That could be helpful. Yeah, that could do it right there. When you export for web and devices, select the metadata you wish to include or exclude. There you go. All right, cool. There's one more question. We'll just do one more, and then we got to call it quits. How do you extract flying hair to a clear background? Yeah, you know what? Don't we all wish we could do that? I'll tell you what. Let me show you my website. I have a tip on this that I will show you. It's a video tip. I've also got a YouTube channel you can go to if you want to. This will take a second. Hold on. If you go to AskBrianWood.com, this is all going to change soon. You're going to see up in the upper right corner my video tips blog. I click on that. I have been negligent and haven't put things up in a long while up here. But anyway, if you go and look for the, sorry, let me move this stuff out of the way. Look for Photoshop. Where are we at here? Photoshop. I have Photoshop Recent Tips. Really? I don't know how to use my own blog. That's awesome. So go to Show All Posts right there. Show All Posts. And in the Photoshop section, you will see how to cut out hair. And I have an exact section on how to do that. Technique for cutting out hair in Photoshop right there. I just clicked on it. And I've got a video on how to do it. And you can see that this woman was actually cut out of a background and put on this image here using flyaways and stuff like that. So anyway, go to my blog, take a look. You can see. And thank you, everybody. And I hope you learned a few things. But thanks anyway.